Vin? Vince? You here?
Hey, Drake, it's like 1 in the afternoon. What are you doing here?
It's 2. And it's been a bad day.
I'm kind of busy back here. Just reach over the bar, get what you need. I'll be with you soon.
Vin, I kind of needed you. Yeah, thanks, Vin.
Yeah.
Moron. No. Whew. Yeah. Yeah. No. 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 Not today. But the cell phone doesn't fit the scene. What are you doing? There we go. 40 proof of pure bliss. Wow. Guess it's time to work. July 9th, 2 years ago, I arrive at 2 a.m. One victim, a male in his late teens, early 20s, sprawled out on his stomach, hands reaching towards the exit of the alley. 3 stab wounds in his back. Blood-stained utility knife near the body. Nothing unique or identifying about the knife itself. Could have been bought at almost any utility store in the city. I send that to the lab for analysis. Blood on the blade is the victim's. No fingerprints, indicating this was a planned murder. Half-drank flask near the body. Substance inside is Daniel Barry. Substance inside is alcohol. Good taste. I send that to the lab. One set of fingerprints on it belonging to the Vic. So, drunk. Wandered down the wrong alley. But again, that knife indicates this was pre-planned, not spur of the moment. Knife wounds to the back are messy, but definitely not enough to be fatal. Time to dig deeper. Ugh. 3 slash wounds across his abdomen, cutting him open. This is what killed him. Going by the blood trail, it looks like he crawled about 15 feet before, as the doctors put it, expiring. Never really cared for that term. Makes humans out to be nothing more than food or drink. Expired feels like it's putting us down. We use lots of terms to try to distance ourselves from the reality of what we do. Try to keep our sanity. I need to keep my sanity. This case is over. It's cold. There's nothing more to be gained from this, just an exercise in futility. What would be the point? Just hurting yourself all over again. But clearly, you won't let this go. Bits of trash and newspaper around the alley. An empty lighter fluid container. Nothing that would seem important. The only thing that might be is a broken beer bottle. One of the larger shards looks the approximate size to deliver the wounds to the back. Huh. The idea of two assailants attacking from both sides can't be discarded. No other evidence on the surface, so search the body. In his left front pocket is his wallet. Inside is still cards and even cash. Further proof this was a pre-planned murder, not a robbery gone wrong. Whoever the Vic ran into just wanted him dead, not his money. Also inside the wallet is identification. Now we have a name. Joseph Chase. 18 years old. Just graduated high school a month prior. Damn. Also inside the wallet is a library card. So I go and speak to some of the people there. The librarian. Students who use the library regularly. The students don't recognize it. The librarian only has a faint memory of him. He says Joe wasn't someone who used the library often, but the few times he did, he always seemed like a polite kid. But from here, I get where he went to high school, Wellerton High. So I go and speak with the teachers there, the staff. They all tell me Joe was a good kid. Got good grades, always worked hard on his studies. I asked if there were any others, students who Joe had issues with. They struggled to think of any. Joe wasn't what they would label a popular kid, but likable. Someone who could connect with most of the distinct groups throughout the school. Eventually, though, two names do come up. Josh Harkin and Kyle Meeks. Two problem kids, two possible killers. So I chased them down and their families and started interviewing them all. Josh Harkin is a dim boy. Treats others like a schoolyard bully. He's had no run-ins with the law before, but the school let me know that he's been involved in numerous fights, at least one of them, with Joe. However, his parents defend him, saying they saw him go to bed that evening and he's had no instances of sneaking out. Kyle Meeks, however, has had a problem with the law before. At the age of 14, he doused a rabbit in lighter fluid and lit its fur on fire, watching it run around wildly until it died of its burns. He enjoyed it. A deranged act. On the night of Joe's murder, Kyle's parents saw him come home around 6, and as they put it, as always, he slunk off to his room and was not seen for the remainder of the evening. He might be sneaking out. So now I have possible suspects. Progress. Back to Joe's wallet. There's one more thing of note inside it. A picture. A photo of him with his mother and father. The photo is nondescript. Doesn't raise any red flags. I interviewed the father first. There tends to be a tighter connection between family members who are the same gender. The father, Jacob Chase, was a thin man, not much muscle on him. He presented himself as a stand-up guy, someone who was always good and encouraging to Joe in his pursuits. He pushed Joe to shoot for the stars when it came to his choice of college. Interviewing other family members paints me a different picture. Joe's father would disappear for days at a time. They believed he had another family. I do some research, follow his patterns, and sure enough, he's having an affair. Having an affair with another woman in the city. They have an infant together, and another is on the way. Replacements. When Joe's father was with Joe and his mother, things were level at their best. Joe's father had a very wrong idea of what it means to be a man. He was prone to abuse both his wife and Joe, usually verbally, mentally, but under rare circumstances things could get physically violent. Considering his build, it's clear his control over them was mostly through mental terror. Joe very easily could have stood up to his father. Why he didn't? About a week before Joe's murder, one of those rare physically violent events did happen. And for one of the few times, Joe fought back, forcing the father to retreat. He was gone the next day, and no one knew if he'd be coming back this time. In a deeper analysis of Joe's body, bruising is found on his chest, likely from the scuffle. One of the many techniques a detective uses is showing pictures of the crime scene, and in particular the body, to possible suspects, trying to see how they respond. If they react coldly or out of place, it's likely they were involved in some way. I show him pictures of the crime scene, the body, and then the bruising. It's surprising how many guilty people break down right then and there. Joe's father didn't break down, but he did try to defend his fight with Joe days before, saying he was trying to push a life lesson, trying to teach Joe how to be a man. I squeeze him. I tell him, you tried so hard to push a life lesson that you took it, maybe even by accident. He breaks down then, pleads to the sky that he didn't kill his kid, apologizing to a Joe who's not there. I've seen this before. People who are close to a victim treat them horribly during their life, and then once that victim's life is ended prematurely, suddenly they become very attached to the victim and genuinely regret their previous actions. A bit late. It seems most hatred is dependent upon continued survival. No matter how much I want to make him for this, his responses and psych evaluations indicate he's not lying to us. And his second family testifies he was with them the night of the murder, in his lover's bed at the time of the murder. Okay. So I move on to the mother, Jillian Chase. She's a bit harder to get a full grasp on. It is likely she is mentally unstable. She swings wildly between acting like a responsible adult, one of the few good people in Joe's life, and then acting out like a child. These swings seem to mostly line up with when her husband would disappear, being that Joe was the reason he left this most recent time. Would give her motive. In any case, I have to consider all possibilities. That anyone could be a suspect, even the mother. But she was out on a bar hop at the time of the murder, spending wildly, verified by her credit card receipts. I interview one more immediate family member not in the photo, Joe's grandmother, Melody Lennon, who was close to him. She's a frail old thing, struggling to get around her apartment. It is highly unlikely she would have been able to kill Joe. She wouldn't have the strength. She claims she hadn't seen Joe for at least a day before the event occurred. But to his character, she says he was a good boy. Never went to parties, always kept his head clean and clear. He recognized the rut his parents and cousin were stuck in and vowed to not be stuck with them. He worked hard to keep good grades, and then landed a spot at a good college. It seemed like his future was bright. But something in that catches my ear. She mentioned a cousin, Danny, a kid she calls rotten. Always getting into trouble, but Joe was kind to even him, spending a good amount of time hanging out together. This is not uncommon, a sort of sympathy towards those who have things worse off than you. But the grandmother knows. Apparently they all know. Deep down, Daniel resented Joe, jealous of how bright Joe's future was looking. Daniel's only a few years older, but his life situation is much worse. So, in depth, Daniel Torrance. I don't have to reach the interview phase to find information about him. A small-time criminal involved in a large number of petty crimes, most of which failed, resulting in him being detained. He's been involved with a bunch of no-name gangs. Still, it was breaking into empty homes, stealing radios, nothing that would indicate he's capable of pre-planned murder. In our interview, Daniel says he loves Joe. That he'd do anything for Joe. Almost convincingly. But at this point I know it's not true. I follow the same technique as the father. I show him pictures of the crime scene, the body, and he responds as a typical uninvolved person would. but he does linger on a wider photo of the crime scene. I ask him what caught his eye. He says it's the flask. I ask him if it's something he recognized, if it's Joe's flask. He says it was, that Joe had worked pretty hard to make sure his parents didn't know. Not that it would have mattered much, they weren't in the picture often. He asks if he could have the flask back as a way to commemorate Joe. I have to remind him the flask is a piece of evidence in an ongoing investigation. Joe's parents may get his belongings back once the case is closed. They will decide who gets what pieces, if any. He needs to talk to them. In regards to his whereabouts, I interview and confirm with family and friends that Daniel got off his job at a local machine shop at 3:45 in the afternoon. He then went straight home and was there for the remainder of the evening. Now I have a number of people close to Joe, but no one who isn't accounted for at the time of the murder. Have to dig deeper. In his right front pocket is a cell phone. It takes some time to backdoor into it at the station, but I am able to get the call records. Just before 9, he received a call from a friend listed as Harry. In reaching out to the family members, I'm given the name Harold Bowman. So I go and interview him and his family. Harold confirms he called Joe around 9, asking him to come over and hang out. The walking distance between their houses is about 10 minutes. Joe arrived just before 9:30, according to Harold and his parents who saw Joe come in. The two boys then went back to Harold's room. The parents could hear them talking and listening to music a bit too loudly for their tastes. The parents went to bed around 10:30. We couldn't say when Joe left. Harold claims Joe left around 11:30. He says Joe never stayed out late or got wild or anything. I press him, asking him for any signs that Joe was acting upset or out of the ordinary. If Harold is telling the truth, then he's one of the last people to see Joe alive. I push him harder, telling him he'll be accused of Joe's murder, trying to get some kind of nervous reaction out of him. And he responds as a typical innocent person would. He's telling the truth and he's not hiding anything from us. Listing out everyone of importance, and they all have alibis that can be backed up by witnesses or solid proof. No theory holds water. The two punks attacking Joe from in front and behind, the abusive father who had his manliness threatened and maybe retaliated, cousin Daniel who got off work and went straight home, and friend Harold who may have been the last person to see Joe alive. I have to remind myself, a detective has to keep their mind open to all possibilities. So, could this have been a random act of violence? Could Joe simply have been drunk and wandered down the wrong alley? It's highly unlikely. In cases like those, usually the wallet is taken, or at the very least the cash inside it. The location of Joe's murder is not far from his house. If this was someone Joe didn't know, considering he was intoxicated at the time, it would have been very easy to just lure him to any corner of the city. They would have taken him somewhere else and killed him. Everything points to someone close to Joe, but at this point, none of the evidence adds up. no matter how good of a detective you are, you're going to have unsolved cases. Crucial pieces of evidence removed from the crime scene, both intentionally and by mistake. No matter how much I want to solve this, no matter how much I want to bring this killer to justice, I can't. There is too much missing. Too many blank spots that can't be filled in, too many possibilities and variables at play. A young man with a bright future is murdered, and I'm going to have to live with being unable to bring him any sort of peace. Which is why I need my own peace. But if this murder was committed by someone Joe knew, it's not likely they're criminal masterminds. The answers are here, somewhere. I can feel it. And I am the most likely person to find them. So, all of the witnesses have alibis. Gotta dig deeper. Trace evidence is found on Joe's shoe. Not the tread, but the top. A clump of dirt is pushed in, indicating he may have struggled with his attacker, and the clump is from the attacker's shoe tread. This is supported by the fact that inside the clump are various fragments of materials unique and different from Joe's shoe tread, most notably of which is an uncommon metal, fragments of it. This metal is used and worked on by several industrial buildings around the city. One of them is the machine shop Danny Torrance works in. Unfortunately, this metal is not that unique, being worked on by over 100 of these locations, meaning it's a tenuous connection at best. Add in that Daniel has witnesses who can place him at his home at the time of the murder, and this claim won't stand up to any level of scrutiny. And that's it. Everything from the crime scene. Still, no theories hold enough weight to be seriously considered. Can't dig any deeper, so I have no choice but to move outwards. I'm able to find one camera in the area, in front of a storefront across the street from the alley. I take a look at it, but the camera was pointed almost directly down at the storefront, as that place has been robbed a number of times in recent years. A bit of luck. The lens was zoomed out wide enough to catch the edge of the alley, so I start looking through the camera footage around the time of the murder. About 20 minutes before, Joey can actually be seen walking on that side of the street, then crossing into the alley. Finally, a break. I calculate how many places are 10 minutes walking distance from that location and still open at the time. And unfortunately, it's really only a warehouse about a block away, 2 blocks away to be exact. And as far as I can tell, there's no one there Joe knew. I fast forward the footage to just before the time of murder. A minute before Joe's approximate time of death, someone comes walking out of the alley. The killer is right there, just walking away, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just ended a young man's life. So close. Unfortunately, the lighting on the street is so dim, the camera quality is so bad, and I'm unable to get any distinguishing features. The only thing I'm able to get is an approximate height. Approximate because the extreme angle of the camera, the wide field of view, messes the perspective up. A minute later, I can see Joe crawling to the edge of the alley before it's passing. This is it. This is what gets me. I don't know why. I've dealt with plenty of bodies before, kids much younger than Joe. But something about all this is just too much. I don't have the words to explain what it is that gets to me about this case. I rewind the footage to just before the murderer walks out. I probably shouldn't have. I am looking, searching desperately for any sign of the struggle, trying to will its existence onto the camera footage. And nothing. It happened just outside the camera's view. And that's it. Everything I'm able to get from the camera footage. I have to remind myself that though I only saw one person leaving the alley, doesn't mean there weren't two killers. The other could have left the other end of the alley. There were no cameras there. At this point, I'm getting desperate. One of our officers tells me they saw Joey that night around 11:30. 11:40, actually. He pulled over, believing that Joe might be drunk on the streets, but found him clear-eyed and on his way home. Judging by the time, the location, and the pathing, he was on his way home from Harold's house. At least that fills in some of the blanks. But the officer was very specific. Joe was alone. There was no one else on the street with or near him. I reach out to anyone else in the department who might have seen something and come up empty. The department reaches out to the public, a common tactic when the evidence train starts losing steam. I'm contacted by one witness who says they were passing by the alley a minute or two before the event occurred. They were moving quickly and only caught a glance They say they saw one person stumbling around drunkenly through the alley away from them. This was likely Joe. They say they didn't see anyone else in the alley, but admits the alley wasn't lit. At this point in the investigation, I have to make a decision as to which path to pursue anymore. I don't have any good cases against any of these suspects, but the best one I have is against the abusive father. But that is shut down almost immediately by his lover, who claims he was in her bed at the time of the murder. And considering her clean background, it is highly unlikely she'd be willing to lie for a child murderer. More theories, countless theories, fly through my head. More debunking, more frustration. Time passes. No more evidence is found, no more witnesses come forward. A year out, as is standard policy, the file is moved to cold case storage, meaning it will likely never be solved. I have to call the mother to update her on the status of the change of the case from open to cold. She breaks down, as they almost always do. I try to comfort her as best I can, but I can barely hold myself together. Joe deserved a whole lot better than the world gave him. He worked hard. He should have been able to enjoy some form of reward. Not long after this update, the family hired a private detective. It didn't take long for the PI to come to the same conclusion we did. Inconclusive. Usually we take some form of pride in that. Proof that you didn't miss anything, that you did your job right. Couldn't take any pride in this one. Sometime after that, Joe's father was found dead, hanged, suicide by the note in his hand. I had hoped for some kind of confession, an admittance of the guilt of killing his son had caught up with him. But the note was vague. No confession. It may very well have been that the father killed his son, that the guilt had gotten to him and caused him to take his own life. But with the evidence at hand, I can't prove it. But that is not good enough. Maybe it was the father, but so what? It needs to be proven. Joe deserves that much. So, maybe the father snuck out of his lover's bed. But by then he was gone for days. How would he know where Joe was? What if Kyle Meeks snuck out at night, tailed Joe himself? The officer said Joe was alone. There was no one on the street with or near him. What if Harold Bowman got him drunk at his place? They both snuck out. Harold lured him to the alley where he was killed. That would cover the time frame. It would cover the chain of events. Yes, that has to be. Everything lines up. Where they were at, when they were in that location, everything would just... The officer saw Joe on his way home from Harold's place. Very much not drunk. God damn it! Why am I doing this again? I need a drink. I'm supposed to be drowning these feelings, not indulging. I need something stronger. Vince! God damn it, Vince! You're worthless, you stupid prick! Where is it? There you are. Daniel Barry, 140 proof enough to ease a horse. Let's just shut it all down. Is this really gonna help? None of this has helped for 2 years. I should probably quit drinking. Maybe I should quit the service. I should definitely quit drinking. Quit. Quit. Harold said Joe never stayed out late. Never got wild or anything. His grandmother said he kept his head clean and clear. Joe didn't drink. So who owned the flask? The knife had no fingerprints on it because the killer was wearing gloves, so neither would the flask. Joe struggled with his attacker. He must have gotten the flask out of their hand, putting his fingerprints on it. So who owned the flask? He asked for the flask back. He asked for the flask back! He resented Joe. Joe was about to leave for college and leave him behind. His alibi is propped up on gang members who wouldn't sell each other out. And despite Joe being nothing but nice to him, he killed Joe. Vince! What? I need your phone. Where is it? Find the bar. Why do you need it? What? Oh, come on, pick up. Mark! Tell the chief inspector to pull out the cold case file of KO-12 and find Daniel Torrance. I need another talk. Rest easy, Joe.
So what happened the other day?
The physical evidence remaining in this place I was able to get a full confession from Daniel Torrance. Joe left his friend's house and returned to an empty home. His father off with a second family, mother off on a bar hop. Around 12 a.m., their landline received a call from Trench's bar, verified by the call records on that line. It was Daniel. He had gotten off work hours earlier, still in full uniform, including utility gloves, and had gotten so drunk, the barkeep had cut him off. He needed someone to walk him home, and Joe was always kind to him. Joe crossed by the storefront with the camera and then went into the alley. My mistake was looking for places 10 minutes from that location. The bar was 5. The rest of the time was Joe trying to keep Daniel steady on his shoulder. After they left the bar, Daniel pulled out a flask from his work jumpsuit's inner pocket and continued drinking. Joe tried to get the flask away from him, but couldn't get him to let it go. Daniel began to vent, telling Joe how annoyed he was that Joe was about to leave him behind, that for every bit of success Joe had, Daniel seemed to bear the same level of failure, that if Joe would just stop succeeding, Daniel would be able to make some headway in life. Joe told him the world didn't work like a set of scales. Daniel admits in hindsight there was no attitude to the statement, but nonetheless it set a drunken Daniel off. He pushed Joe off him, pulled out his work utility knife and stabbed him 3 times in the back. During that time, Joe tried to get the knife out of his hand, but only succeeded in getting the flask out of his hand. Daniel then spun him around, slashed him across the abdomen, cutting him open, causing him to fall to the ground. Daniel hurried out of the alley, which is the person we saw on the camera, before Joe crawled to the end of the alley. Daniel hurried home. Friends and family saw the blood-stained clothes and gloves. He wouldn't tell them what had happened, but that if anyone asked, he had gotten off work and come straight home. By now, 2 years later, he had gotten rid of his blood-stained clothes, burned them. He had an extra jumpsuit for work, but needed to ask them for a new pair of utility gloves. That much the shop was able to corroborate. But trace blood evidence was found in the carpet in the closet where he'd stored his clothes. DNA analysis confirmed it was Joe's blood, proving this beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that was how it happened. Daniel's now facing a murder charge.
Crazy. It's all so crazy. So what's next? You got your white whale? You quitting the service?
No. But I will be quitting drinking.
Well, as bartender, I take some offense to that.
Sorry, Vin. None intended. I'll still come here for lunches.
I'll keep taking your money.
Sounds like a deal. Come on. Well, that means lunch is over. See you around, Vin.
Hopefully not too soon.